When I got back to Zweig Group in 2013, I said, we should do a podcast for the Zweig letter. It's the easiest way for us to kind of be everywhere, right? You take that mentality that Pat Flynn and others talk about being everywhere. Well, I wanted to be everywhere with the company, and I thought, what's the simplest way to do that? Create a podcast. Well, what could I create a podcast about? Well, we've got this newsletter that's been running on a regular basis. People like it, they read it, they get a lot of high quality information. So why don't we just go ahead and create a podcast around that? And so that's what I did. Is I went on and took care of starting this podcast, and essentially it started out pretty anemic. And I just want to be really honest with you. The podcast actually sucked, okay? And I'm just giving you license to suck at first, because it's going to happen. I'm telling you, it's coming for you. And if nothing else, you can learn from some of my mistakes so that when you do start, whatever my ceiling was will be your floor. And you can just go that much faster, that much quicker, okay? But it wasn't the greatest. And it wasn't because I wasn't good, because I'm actually a pretty good speaker. I like talking about a wide variety of topics. I think I have a good understanding of that, and I understand this industry. But I just couldn't get my head around what would be the best way to represent this information. And so, guess what I did? Can anybody guess how I represented this podcast when we first started? Since it's a newsletter, what do you think I did? I read the articles. Jesus, you guys have heard it, haven't you? So I read the articles. I take stories from the Zweig letter and memorialize them in podcast form. Got to be the worst decision I could have ever made. And probably about 3 months into it, I'm sitting there looking at the guy that's writing the article regurgitate it back to me as we're sitting there. I've got my headphones on and I'm listening to this, and I'm like, who the hell is going to listen to this? I would say you should err on the side of talking to more people than less, because you'll miss out on opportunities. The other thing is, don't 100% rely on a resume. And I know some of you have said this. I just want to look at a really good resume. How many of you can write a really good resume? My point exactly. The thing is, too often we rely on what's written on paper, and a lot of these young, especially the engineers and architects, don't always write good resumes. They don't always represent what they're capable of on a sheet of paper. But we rely on that sheet of paper to tell the whole story. The whole story is told when you physically talk to somebody, when you interact with them. So I would rather you spend err on the side of spending more time talking with an individual, interviewing them with open-ended questions, which we're going to share in a second. And at the end of your tables are open-ended interview sheets. I would like you to pass those down. So those are yours, Dustin. Just pass them down to everybody. You guys should all have them. And yeah, no problem. So we'll look at those in a second. But I would rather you err on the side of becoming an astute and really good interviewer, to the point where you can connect with somebody even informally through coffee and surreptitiously interview them without them even knowing it, and make mental notes about an individual, as opposed to relying on a sheet of paper, which a lot of times doesn't tell the full story. Yes, people have company resumes. Yes, people have company project lists. That's all well and fine, but you really want to learn about an individual and what they're truly capable of, you're going to have to talk with them. You really are. And it's something that we miss out on doing. So with the relationship piece, it's a long-term process. If it's done well, it can certainly pay off handsomely. Obviously, from a relationship perspective, you want to learn to give as much as you get, meaning what? Well, you run into a young engineer that works for another firm. They work for a competitor of yours. You can't necessarily recruit them right away. Certainly you can't recruit them in front of their boss. But you can certainly say to them, hey, you know what? If you ever run into any problems, or if you ever just need some help, I've been doing this for 15 years now. I would love to just share with you some of the things that I've been through. And if I can help you in any way on anything that you run into, just let me know. Just build a relationship with people. Don't feel like I've got to recruit everybody that I run into because they would be perfect for my organization. Maybe they would be, but start to build a relationship first. Let's start to work things out. Relationships are more important both internally between HR and hiring managers, and externally between your firm and the available talent pool. And obviously, people want to work with people that they like. I tell people all the time, when it comes to recruiting, And just as a show of hands in this room, how many of you know people that do something along the lines of what you do, but they work at other firms? Raise your hand. Most people do. And if you were to poll most of the employees that work for you, and you ask them that same question, they're all going to tell you, I know other people that do what I do at other firms. And you need to start encouraging them. Hey, just build a relationship with that person. They might be a friend, because people want to work with people that they like. They do. It just works that way. And it actually makes the work environment a lot more fun. Lincoln was one of my favorite presidents. It's a great book on leadership in turbulent times, written by Doris Kearns Goodwin, that I highly recommend from a leadership standpoint, that I think would be really beneficial for you. But the bottom line is that Abraham Lincoln, you talk about somebody that experienced a level of failure, Lincoln was it. I mean, before he was 40, his life was a hot mess. But there was still something about him that ultimately got him to where he became one of the greatest presidents that this country has ever seen. And now whether you agree with that or not, that's a whole other story. As a historian, and I look back at what this gentleman was able to do, I'm amazed at it. But I love this quote from him, and it says, when I get ready to talk to people, I spend 2/3 of the time thinking what they want to hear, and 1/3 of the time thinking about what I want to say. And the idea here is you always have to consider your audience. You have to consider your audience, and you have to consider the message that you're trying to convey to them. If you are speaking to any group and you don't take time to consider who that group is and what's going to resonate with them, you do so at your own peril. Whether it is a group of politicians in your community, and we all know that politicians look at things a certain way. They look at things through certain types of glasses, where the world is skewed a certain way to the things that they're trying to get done and only what they're trying to get done. And it may not necessarily line up with what you're trying to do, but you need to understand who's in the room and who the audience is. Even before coming to talk to you, I understand engineers, I understand architects, I understand environmental scientists, planners. It's important to have an understanding of who your audience is and what's going to resonate with them.